One of the first places liberated by the rebels in Damascus is Sadnaya prison north of the capital. It's the most notorious penal institution run by the Assad regime. It's thought tens of thousands of people have been killed there since the outbreak of civil war in 2011. Now, you may find some of the images in our next report distressing.
Rushing to free their loved ones, thousands of people stormed Syria's most famous prison near Damascus. Many lost contact with family members over the years, without knowing their fate and clinging to hope.
I just found my brother. It's been 6 years.
Human rights groups estimate 30,000 people were killed in this prison alone. It was nicknamed the Human Slaughterhouse by Amnesty International. Under now-ousted President Bashar al-Assad, tens of thousands of Syrians disappeared into the country's network of prisons. The slightest suspicion of dissent could result in incarceration. For many, it would also mean torture and death. In 2013, thousands of photos of victims were smuggled out of Syria. They are known as the Caesar photos, a proof of human rights abuses under Assad. As hopes for a new era grow, many say it will be hard to forget crimes the Assad family committed against so many of their own people.
The Assads, they were a criminal regime. We only received pain and torture from them.
Freed prisoners are joining the crowds on the streets of Damascus. But for many families, there is still an agonizing wait ahead to find out whether their loved ones are still alive.
Well, let's take a closer look at the liberation of Sadnaya prison. Anwar al-Bunni is a Syrian human rights lawyer and former political prisoner who has worked in exile to bring members of the Assad regime to justice. And from Washington, we're joined by Syria analyst Ibrahim al-Assil from the Middle East Institute. He was detained and tortured by Syrian secret police back in 2011. Welcome both. Anwar al-Bunni, can we start with you and start with your reaction to the liberation of Sadnaya prison, which I understand you know well?
Yeah, I know it. When I saw the Sadnaya prison broke. Sadnaya prison, it's simple for dictatorship of Assad regime. He terrified all the Syrians with this symbol. Everybody afraid to have any opposition to don't go to this prison. This symbol of Bashar al-Assad regime, when it's collapse, everybody feel Assad regime time it's gone and forever. I know this prison, my brothers spent 10 years inside this prison. I visit them total of these 10 years. And we heard a lot of testimony from the victims who survived from this prison. Unfortunately, Assad regime, after the revolution, killed tens of thousands from detainees in this prison. Right. We have 150,000 just disappear, missing person in detention place in Syria. Until now, after all this prison open, there is 120,000 person still missing. That means Assad regime killed them in Sadnaya and other detention place. It's like hell, really.
Like hell. And Ibrahim al-Assil, your reaction from Washington?
You know, first, thank you for having me. It's an honor to be co-hosted with Mr. al-Bunni. I was only detained for a few days, but they were enough for me to see what was happening on the other side of the sun, as Syrians used to see. So I want to congratulate Mr. al-Bunni. He suffered a lot, he sacrificed a lot, for Syria, and many Syrians really appreciate his sacrifice for bringing Syria to the light again. As Mr. al-Bunni said, Syria was ruled through notorious secret prisons and dungeons of tortures, something on the scale of the Stasi, something on the scale of Stalin's prisons, to actually suppress and oppress the population and oppress them and torture them into submission. The issue of detainees was at the core of the Syrian uprising, and the symbolism of the rebels trying to reach the prisons first and before any other buildings, even before the presidential palace itself, really symbolizes how many Syrians, and we're talking about hundreds of thousands of people who were detained and tortured over the decades. And that means many Syrians, almost every Syrian family, lost someone or know someone who was forcibly disappeared, and people were never able to hear about them again.
And if I understood Anwar al-Bunni correctly, such was this prison's reputation that when they came for you, the one place in this hellhole of a country that you did not want to go to was this prison.
Yes, absolutely. Sorry, I thought the question was for Mr. al-Bunni. Yes, absolutely. So I was kept at the Syrian Air Force Intelligence at Al-Mazeh Airport, another notorious one. Sednaya is wholly and fully another level. And even in Sednaya, there are levels. Syrians know these things. Syrians have nicknames for these things, and people shake when they hear about them. They know that if you are going inside of them, you are lost. If you leave them, you are born again. And when people they leave those prisons because they are designed to rule society by fear. So when they leave, the whispers of people talking about those stories, that's how Assad wanted to keep Syrians silent. And that's why Syrians didn't want to remain under his oppression and took to the streets and said, no matter what happens, and no matter what we're gonna face next, we are not going back to those dungeons.
Right. So, Anwar, we all know now that terrible things happened under the Assad regime, beatings, tortures, disappearances. How should the new Syria address those injustices?
It's the big mission, in fact, in the new Syria, building structure for the transition and justice. There is no peace in Syria will be stable without justice for all the victims. Assad regime committed the crimes not after 2011. He started to commit the crimes from its beginning, from Hama massacre. I am from Hama, and I be there in Hama massacre in 1981 and 1982. And he committed a lot of crimes after that. So his structure building of crimes, and those people will not never allow to them to have immunity or escape from justice. Justice will come to Syria. It's coming for part of them in Europe, Koblenz, we work on it, and other in France. Now there is a restaurant against Bashar al-Assad, and also in Germany there is many arrest warrant against high-level ranking officer from the security. And our work to build structure for transitional justice council, apply justice in Syria in front of the victims and catching the criminals and put them in jail to be some peace of the victims.
Right. I want to put this question to both of you, but I'll start with you, Ibrahim al-Assil. How do you ensure in the new Syria that justice is justice and not vengeance?
Thank you for this question. I think this is just the beginning of another challenge we're going to face. When people took to the streets in Syria, they wanted to build a just and pluralistic Syria. Assad got in the way. People wanted to topple Assad. Now this is another chance and another chapter for the Syrian people, but we all realize this is full with the challenges. But we all believe as a nation that we have the needed expertise. We have the needed professionals. We have the needed talented, motivated people to work on that. Syrian people always found a way through the cracks of oppression to organize, to talk to each other, to document the violations, and to communicate with the rest of the world. Now we want to see all these organizations working together and with some help with the international community, but we want this process to be Syrian-led. We want justice, we want transitional justice, because that's very important for people to have their own closure. Many people never saw the bodies of their beloved one, and they won't. Now it's the search for the mass graves will start. Other issues will make things very emotional for Syrians, but we need to see at least a path for justice, so people know how to manage all that emotions they need to face over the next few days, weeks, and months, so they know they don't have to take things into their own hand. There is a path for justice, and it's just gonna take time, but we are on the right track.
So Anwar, this notion of Syrian-led justice, and I know that in your work you have pursued some of these people through European courts. Do you see that work continuing in European courts, or do you see it coming home to Syria?
It will be continue here, and it will be go away in Syria, because when the criminals pass in Europe, they will be accounting here. But the criminals in Syria, they will be account in Syria. So many now criminals, you see the street, the security empty. All of them run away. Where? They hiding now in Syria. Bashar al-Assad ran away to Russia, but the others cannot have a plane to run to Russia. They hiding now. And all of them thinking and dreaming to come to Europe. And that's what we're waiting to them here. And when arrive here, they will catch them, because we have a lot of evidence, a lot of witnesses, a lot of victims of them. And we can building cases against them here and catch them here.
Can I throw a slightly naive question at you? But is there a place for forgiveness within this? And I'm looking at the examples of South Africa and Northern Ireland, where there was sort of truth and reconciliations. Does that have any part to play? It's
different. Situation in Syria is different about Rwanda, about others. In other country, they committed war crimes. In Syria, crimes against humanity. When you torture somebody for enjoy, not for have information, not to defense about your country, just to have fun. When you broken a human being just because he against you, you don't need from him, just broken him. Make him lost his humanity. How you can live with somebody feel like that? Nobody can live with them. Not about forgive them. Many Syrians committed the crimes as because they had to, they defend about themselves, they should to do that. It's okay sometimes forgiven for those or not, but who committed crimes with attention to harm the people, the civilian people, just to enjoy or to take power, that you cannot forgive him.
Is that your feeling as well, Ibrahim al-Assil? There is no place for forgiveness in this. These people must be pursued.
You know, mainly this question, I think, should be addressed to the people who have rights, like Mr. al-Bunni and other detainees and prisoners. And to build on what he just said eloquently, you know, forgiveness needs justice, and justice needs forgiveness. Syrians will discuss how much they go through the ranks of the institutions of the Syrian criminals. But many of those peoples who committed the crime of torturing thousands of people to death, they need to be held accountable. That's for peace. That's to see a stable Syria. Those are criminals. How many they go into in the ranks of lower ranks individuals? That's of course a very specialized question for people who are specialized in transitional justice. But those who gave the orders, those who institutionalized torture, those who made it systematic inside Syria, should be held accountable. People cannot forgive if they don't see that there is some sort for a path for them to have a closure and see at least some sort of what they could call justice.
All right. There we will leave it. Thank you both. Ibrahim al-Assil from the Middle East Institute in Washington, thank you. Human rights lawyer Anwar al-Bunni here with me. Thank you. Thank you both. We wish you well.
For more on this, we can speak now with Omar Alshogre. He's a human rights advocate and director for detainee affairs at the Syrian Emergency Task Force. He himself was detained for 3 years in a Syrian prison. Omar, thank you very much for being with us. First of all, tell us how you felt when you learned that the Assad regime had been toppled.
I've been waiting for that moment for 14 years. 14 years of displacement, of torture, of killing, and then I see it early in the morning, and the people are out on the street. The Assad regime has fallen. I could scream very loud for that, but I cried because it deserves the tears of joy. This regime has killed my father and my brothers, and bombed my school and burned my town and tortured me for 3 years. So the joy is unmatchable.
We can see it in your smile. Many political detainees are now being released from Syria's notorious prisons. You know these prisons all too well. Give us a sense of the scope of this prison system, how many detainees there might be, and what Assad's ousting will mean for them and their families.
Documented detainees in Syria before the fall of the regime used to be around 139,000. That's the documented. I believe it's over 200,000 people who've been in these cells tortured on a daily basis. Just to give you a simple example that tells you how brutal those prisons is, the guard could come at any moment to your cell and tell you and your cellmates, hey, I want you to choose one of you to be executed tomorrow. And the guard leaves. And then you have to sit with your cellmates and see, hey, who is willing to die tomorrow under torture so the rest doesn't die? And then we have to make a lottery to choose someone of us to be killed tomorrow. You can imagine, it's not easy. If it's too cold outside, the guard would come in to warm up his body by torturing us. If his wife doesn't cook him food the last night, he come and kill us. Because the guards have had the immunity. They know they could kill so many without being questioned to why. Why did you kill that person? This regime has killed Syrians for over 50 years. It's not new. The world knew about it. However, as we mentioned, the world have seen us struggle and left us alone. We fought alone. We were in pain. We were tortured alone, and we dreamed alone. We hoped alone, and today we win alone. Actually. And it's a huge disappointment to see that 100 democracies in the world did nothing to liberate over 139,000 political prisoners, while we waited until a few rebel groups come and fight and liberate those prisons. I'm very grateful for them forever. I will always be grateful for them and respect them for that move, while the world has disappointed. The strongest nations in the world did nothing to save the lives of so many.
You mentioned some of the horrible abuses that have taken place in Syria with political prisoners and others. How can Syria go about addressing questions of justice and accountability in connection with those horrible abuses now?
The first step towards justice has been bringing down the Assad regime, and that's check. We got it. So next step is to making sure that the people who were killed and tortured, the ones who sacrificed their lives for us to have freedom, we need to have that freedom. We need to have that democracy that we dreamed of. So that's very important for Syrian people to remember, that we have to be engaged on a daily basis in the politics to make sure we build a process that allow us to end up having an election, having a democracy, and choose the people that we believe can represent us and care about us. So that's how we achieve part of the justice. Then there is the necessity of actually bringing the criminals, including Assad and his family and the top of the intelligence services, to prosecute them for the crimes they committed. In Syria, you cannot prosecute everyone who committed a crime because the number is so huge, because the regime had implicated so many people in these wars. But we would have to end up prosecuting the top leaders, I think, and then we would have to reconcile with our pain, with our suffering. And I can give you a very beautiful example, actually. My sister has been hiding on the coast where I am from for 10 years. We were not allowed to talk to her on the phone because if the regime knows we're talking to her, they may kill her. And she is in Banyas. Banyas is a Sunni city surrounded by a lot of Alawite cities and villages. And they were celebrating yesterday when the regime fell on the street, my sister and our town. And the Alawites came with their elder. And they took the mics and apologized for all the pain they caused people, for being part of the regime's game, for being forced mostly to be part of the regime's game. And the end of the celebration ended in the Alawites villages. So that I could not imagine happening so quickly. So people being willing, maybe not to forgive, but to move on, to say, okay, I may not love you, I may not forgive you, but I would like to live in peace and to send my kids to school without worrying. And just, I want the time of Assad to be over and to start a new life. So I'm very hopeful for Syria. I'm very hopeful that we will be able, because the regime didn't fall in a week. It took 14 years. Those 14 years taught us that we have to love each other, to care. We have to be inclusive, to care about all Syrians, regardless whether they are Muslims, Christians, whether they are Kurds or Druze or Sunni or Shiite or Alawites or whoever they are. Everybody deserves their respect. Unless they have committed crimes they need to be prosecuted for.
Omar, thank you very much for talking with us today. That was human rights advocate Omar Alshogre.